But when Trump's federal communications chair was unhappy with some of Jimmy Kimmel's remarks, he said media companies, quote, can find ways to take action on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC. The next day, Secretary Hegseth announced that journalists at the Pentagon needed to sign a pledge not to report information, DOD, for DOD to revoke press credentials of a reporter just because the reporter published a story that was critical of President Trump.
Approved for release by the Department of
Whoa.
Defense. They could still be critical. We're not getting into their contents.
Well, are you telling me that the new regime is that Secretary Hegseth will decide what has been released?
Senator Elizabeth Warren delivered a powerful warning during a Senate hearing about threats to press freedom under Donald Trump's leadership. Warren pointed to actions by Trump's FCC chair, who threatened media figures like Jimmy Kimmel, and by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who reportedly forced Pentagon journalists to pledge not to report unapproved information, even if it wasn't classified. She said this kind of censorship strikes at the heart of the First Amendment. Questioning Army General Counsel nominee Mr. Young, Warren pressed him to affirm that his oath to the Constitution includes protecting press freedom, and that it would be unconstitutional for the Defense Department to revoke a journalist's credentials just for criticizing Trump. After some hesitation, Young finally agreed. Warren closed with a stark warning. When leaders try to silence journalists, they're not protecting national security, they're protecting themselves. A free press, she said, is vital.
Well said. Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A free press is right there in the First Amendment to the Constitution. But when Trump's federal communications chair was unhappy with some of Jimmy Kimmel's remarks, he said media companies, quote, can find ways to take action on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC. The next day, Secretary Hegseth announced that journalists at the Pentagon needed to sign a pledge not to report information DOD hasn't approved for release, including unclassified information. DOD reportedly rolled those rules back, but it wasn't Hegseth's first crackdown on journalists, and I worry it may not be the last. It is the job of a free press to uncover problems that DOD doesn't want people to know about, like military families living in mold-infested homes, or Secretary Hegseth texting classified war plans. Mr. Young, you were acting general counsel for DOD for most of 2025, and now you're nominated to be the Army's top lawyer. So let me ask you, Mr. Young, do you consider your oath to the Constitution to include the First Amendment?
Yes, Senator, I do.
Thank you. We need independent journalists at DOD now more than ever. President Trump has ignored locally elected leaders to deploy military forces to Los Angeles, to D.C., to Chicago, and he's told generals he wants the military to use American cities as, quote, training grounds, close quote, and handle the, quote, enemy from within. Now, this is extremely dangerous, and we need independent journalists reporting the truth, not just whatever spin Pete Hegseth wants to put on it. So, Mr. Young, would it be consistent with the First Amendment for DOD to revoke press credentials of a reporter for publishing a story that was critical of the Trump administration?
Senator, we're very cognizant and very conscientious of the First Amendment and the freedom of the press to be able to report as needed. It was my understanding that the policy was designed to inform the members of the press. The ability to access the Pentagon is a bit different than a normal public forum.
Well, I got to stop you right there, Mr. Young. I asked you a very straightforward question. I think you can answer with a yes or no. And that is it consistent with the First Amendment for DOD to revoke press credentials of a reporter just because the reporter published a story that was critical of President Trump. That should be an easy one for a lawyer who has served as you have for many years.
Yes, Senator, I would say it would be consistent with the First Amendment if the basis was that the person published information that was not otherwise approved for release by the Department of
Whoa!
Defense. They could still be critical. We're not getting into their content, Senator.
Well, are you telling me that the new regime is that Secretary Hegseth will decide what has been released and that reporters can only talk about what the Secretary releases? That's
No,
your
Senator,
view of
I'm
the
not.
First Amendment?
No, Senator, I'm not saying that.
Well, then let me ask my question one more time. If a reporter publishes a story critical of the Trump administration, is that grounds for revoking that reporter's press credentials?
No, Senator, it's not.
Great. Okay. Hard to get there, but I'm glad we did. Let me ask you one more question. And that is, if the courts rule any of the DOD's press restrictions unconstitutional, will you stand by your oath to the Constitution and tell the military leadership to comply with court orders? Or is your plan to bend a knee to Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth?
Certainly would advise to comply with court orders.
Okay. You know, I appreciate this. Freedom of the press is a core pillar of our democracy, and the public needs to know if sending troops to war under false pretenses or if it's exposing our troops to toxic water. This is a scary moment, but there is power in raising our voices. And that is why Donald Trump and his lackeys at the Pentagon want to shut down reporters and shut down access to the truth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.